welcome to Realeconomy. In this episode, we'll look at the impact of the coronavirus crisis on the most vulnerable groups of the societies in Europe and what the European Union is doing to help them. The pandemic is expected to increase the numbers of deprived people and makes it harder for those who are already struggling. To learn more, we visited Portugal to see how the EU is dealing with the needs of an increased number of deprived people, and we interviewed the president of the Foundation for Progressive Studies. But first, a quick crash course on what defines a severely deprived person in Europe and which groups and countries are most affected at the moment.
The lives of the poorest people in Europe are severely constrained by a lack of resources. Often they can't afford to pay rent or basic utility bills, keep their homes warm, eat good quality food like fish and meat, go for a week's holiday, run a car, own a washing machine or colour TV, or pay for a telephone. In 2019, 5.6% of the EU's population found themselves in this situation. That's around 24 million people. It's predicted the coronavirus pandemic will significantly increase the number of deprived in Europe. The risk is especially high for young people, those with low levels of education, and single-parent families, especially those headed by women. Bulgaria, Greece and Romania had the highest levels of severe deprivation in the EU last year.
The Fund for European Aid to the Most Deprived was set to provide 3.8 billion euros on food or other material assistance support to the most disadvantaged groups all over Europe. In Portugal, a country that struggled for years with financial crisis, more than 2 million people are at risk of poverty or social exclusion. So, we visited Lisbon to see how the people there are supported in covering their basic needs, including daily nutrition, in the middle of COVID-19 crisis.
The association Casa de Misericordia in Lisbon is attempting to adapt to the new reality imposed by the coronavirus. Despite the current health measures, they continue to distribute food baskets to the city's most disadvantaged. People like Sandra, an accountant by trade but without work for a year. She survives on welfare and this food aid.
This is important for me because it fills in the gaps for many things that I can't really buy. For example, milk is really something that I lack. And now I have 2 6-litre packs. And with the money I have left, which is not needed for food, I can pay electricity, water and gas bills.
Food baskets like Sandra's are funded by the European Feed Fund. In Portugal, it provides 177 million for food and material assistance. The associations that distribute them can also use this money to buy protective equipment. In Portugal, the IMF predicts that the unemployment rate will double in 2020. This woman has lost 80% of her income as an independent salesperson. Her husband's tourism-related business was unable to renew her contract. Before, they used to deliver food aid. Now they need it.
Now it's us who need this type of support. Before, it was unthinkable.
The only thing we can be sure of is the remaining 20% of my activity and this food aid. We also have a child, and that's a big concern. With this help, we manage to pay other expenses and be sure we get to the end of the month.
With the fall in household incomes, demand for food aid is expected to increase dramatically. The association says it's already seen a rise of 15%. Workers with low wages in precarious jobs are the most affected.
We see all types of profiles, but mostly people who've lost their jobs. We anticipate that there could be a rise in demand for food products by about 50%. We're in an adjustment phase right now, and we're having to adapt in terms of logistics, as well as check storage availability.
Back to Brussels to interview the president of the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, Mrs. Maria João Rodrigues. Mrs. Rodrigues, the recession is already here, but the most vulnerable groups are, and the most affected, of course, are the youngest people and the single-parent families. So what kind of measures can the EU take in the short term and long term so that everybody is protected?
Let me focus on the target groups you referred to, young people. Yes, many of them, they have jobs, but precarious jobs. So we need to make sure that the contract, the short-term contract they have, should be extended over time. Then you also referred to single parents. They are confronted with the dilemma either to go to job and to leave their children at home or their children in schools which are not safe enough, or they keep at home with their children and they lose their salary and their jobs. We need to extend layoff schemes for all the single parents to make sure that they are not confronted with this terrible dilemma.
What about the thousands of seasonal or undocumented workers who don't have the paperwork to apply for unemployment benefits, for example? How these people should be protected?
Let me refer to a quite smart measure launched in Portugal, which was to offer to these people the possibility to register themselves, to benefit from the social rights. And like that, we can turn informal work without rights into formal work with rights. And I see this is a win-win because these workers will benefit from this. Secondly, public systems will also benefit because once these workers are formal, then they will also start paying their normal taxes and contribution for social protection.
How can the most deprived people benefit from this new recovery fund currently debated?
We need to make sure that SMEs particularly are directly supported with the financial means to survive and to relaunch their activities. And we need to make sure that minimum income schemes will work everywhere to make sure that everybody will protected from falling into poverty. This kind of support can only work if it involves not only loans, but grants. I think an historical moment has come where Europeans need to decide.
Mrs. Rodrigues, thank you very much for this interview. Thanks for watching and see you soon on Euronews.